Wow. I just sat down with Henry Kirkwood, who just won Bird Photographer of the Year for the video category. He's an incredible wildlife filmmaker, and in this interview, he did not hold back.
But people just aren't really that bothered, and also not the response I expected.
He's filmed wild dolphins, tuna, bird life, and of course, incredible footage of peregrines for his award-winning short film. Today, we're diving into 4 topics for Henry to give his inside scoop on: the Bird Photographer of the Year contest and what actually goes into creating an award-winning submission, wildlife filmmaking advice, wildlife content creation advice for those looking to post on YouTube or Instagram, and lastly, an inside look at the wildlife filmmaking industry. There's chapters below if you want to skip to a certain section, but I would watch the whole thing because he's awesome. It was a great chat, and there's some gold in here that you won't want to miss. Thank you so much for being here, mate. Really appreciate it. For those who don't know, do you mind telling us about your submission?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on here. I submitted a 3-minute sequence of peregrine falcons, which live in the Avon Gorge in Bristol, which is only a 2-minute drive from my house. And I submitted in January about a pair of peregrine falcons over the course of a year who raised 4 chicks in 2024, and just kind of like, yeah, how they raise their young over the course of the year. But the one shot that I'd been after for kind of 15 years since I started was a peregrine making a kill, and I got it catching a rock dove over the river. So yeah, I just kind of put a sequence together into some sort of chronological order, submitted it in January, completely forgot about it, and then in November I had an email saying, you've won the video category, Bird Photographer of the Year, and we're going to be releasing this information in 4 hours time. So yeah, I completely forgot about it.
Yeah, congrats. That's awesome. So you mentioned story there. How do you go about crafting the story for a video like this, especially in such a short video, 3 minutes? How do you go about crafting a story for that?
Yeah, it is difficult to kind of fit as much as I wanted into that 3 minutes. And I just start really by getting all the information down on paper and just going through kind of, right, what is their actual life cycle in the year? They start off in March acrobatically displaying, then they mate in April, then they lay their eggs in June, and then they obviously rear their chicks for a month. And the chicks also, between when they fledge, so when they leave the nest, and kind of 2 to 3 weeks after, they're really not wary of people. So sometimes they'll land within kind of 3 or 4 meters from you, and they'll be looking at you like this, and they just don't really have a care in the world. And then kind of 3 to 5 weeks after, they're a bit more wary. So that's kind of the critical time where you want to try and film them as much as possible, because it just allows you to get really close to them. And then yeah, they're just kind of chasing everything they see. So I've actually got some footage of them hitting a branch on the tree. They almost use it as target practice. So kind of pretending it's like a pigeon, and they'll just like target these tops of trees and hit the branch and snap a twig off.
Wow.
But actually they sometimes pick the wrong things to go after. So I've actually got it going after a mute swan, and it wasn't trying to kill it or anything, but it's just kind of like anything that flies, it takes an interest in and will look at it and go for it. So yeah, I was going after this swan, which must be 10 to 15 times its size.
Yeah.
And the swan kind of, yeah, it didn't like it. But yeah, it's difficult, but it's about getting it down on paper and then trying to create a shot list of what you want to try and capture, which obviously doesn't always happen because you can only capture what is actually happening in front of you. And then it's about taking it to the edit suite and working with what you've got and sorting it all out into the different segments, and then trying to put it in some sort of chronological order.
I know this might be difficult to quantify, but do you have any idea on like how much footage you have in total?
I mean, in terms of actually time spent over the past 10 years, if I was to guess, it was probably spent 300 to 400 hours up there. Yeah, it's a bit sad, I know, but you have to spend that amount of time up there to actually get any sort of footage, because I mean, I've been up there for kind of 7 or 8 hours on a Saturday and only seen them fly 2 or 3 times if it's in the winter and they haven't got young to feed, which, is maybe not the greatest use of my time. And I think that's also why there's not many sequence of peregrine falcons on natural history shows, because if you think about it from the people making the decisions, and if we send a camera operator out there over the course of a year, how much are we actually going to spend in their time? It's going to be a lot of money, and also the chances of being able to put together a sequence may not be as high if they were going to send someone out to film foxes, for example, which is
Yes.
a lot easier to film. So that's why I'm kind of focusing on peregrines as well, because I actually have that time and have spent the amount of time to get this sequence together. So in terms of actually potentially licensing the footage to someone is pretty high. So yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time there. And then in terms of actually the amount of footage, it's a lot. And I've got a lot of footage because obviously that 3-minute segment is the best of what I've got, but I've just got a whole load of backlog that I just haven't done anything with as of yet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. So what goes into the pre-planning process for shooting something like this? Are you writing a shot list? Are you writing ideas that you think would be good to capture? Are you thinking this is something that I haven't seen before? Or what kind of goes into the pre-planning stages?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned like the kind of information that I put down on what I want the sequence to look like. But then I guess it's kind of after every shoot, I'll log all of my footage and put it into categories, and I'll say male, female, young, leaving the nest, or flying. Is it against the sky? Is it against the green background? Hunting, eating.
You do this for every clip.
Yeah, I think you have to,
Wow.
because when it comes to the
Wow.
editing, otherwise you've just got one big long timeline and you're going through each and every shot. But if you have
Yeah.
it categorized, then, you know, if I want onto the hunting sequence and I've got all my clips laid out. So it just makes it
Yeah.
easier when it comes to the editing process, really,
Okay.
having everything, kind of categorized. And it does take a lot of time after every shoot, but actually it saves time in the long run when it comes to the edit.
So what are some of the trends that you've picked up on with people submitting nowadays versus maybe a few years ago? Or are there any trends that you've seen in the Bird Photography of the Year contest, or just general contests in general that are similar to this one?
To be honest, I don't really pay that much attention to it. I know I probably should. I just kind of do my own stuff really and just think, well, what would I want to see if I was watching someone else's? I think one thing that's changed is maybe in terms of photography specifically is the arty side of it. So I think that maybe in previous years, it's been more about the actual behavior and the crispness of the shot and that kind of thing. But now it's a lot more to do with, I'd say like an arty look. So like it'd be like more to do with the backgrounds and the light and stuff, which obviously is like a really important factor. But just from my kind of perspective, I actually prefer like the more rare behavior shots. And I might be wrong in this, but I feel like that maybe judges are picking more arty shots over like incredible behavior shots.
All right, let's talk about videography for a bit. What's the best piece of advice that you've gotten from another videographer?
I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and when I was starting out, I had no experience in videography. I watched a lot of YouTube videos about how to set up the camera, videoing techniques, how to track subjects and that kind of thing. But in terms of advice from another videographer, I would say just be ready. Like you have to be ready at every stage for what's about to happen. So like a prime example of that is when I went to Canada in 2023 and we were looking for orcas from the shore, and I went down to the shore and there was nothing going on. Like I didn't see any sort of wildlife at all. And I was like, well, do I get my camera out? And I was like, well, I need to be ready for anything. And so I set my tripod up, got all my camera settings right, and just sat there for an hour and nothing happened. And then round the corner came a pod of orcas, and they only went in front of me for maybe 30 seconds because they were traveling quite fast from right to left. And had I not had that and I hadn't had everything set up, they would have been gone in front of me before I had any chance to set up. So yeah, I'd say just kind of know what settings you're on and be ready for anything that's about to happen.
I wish I had that advice a year ago. I was on Kangaroo Island and I'd taken my camera every single time I left the car. And then this one time I was going to the bathroom and I was like, it's a 10-second walk. I won't bring my camera. And in that second, glossy black cockatoos fly right over in a part that they've never been seen before. And I didn't have my camera. I run back and they've already flown away. And I was talking to some people who work there and they were like, no, they don't live on this side of the island. But I had no proof because of the camera that one time. Do you have any moments that you've missed out on because you didn't have your camera with that stick with you or anything?
I'm sure I have. Nothing springs to mind, but
I've tried to wipe them from your memory.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to think about those moments, but I just always like, even if there's nothing happening, everything's set up. So yeah, thankfully I don't have that problem anymore.
That's a good piece of advice. What would you say, instead of the biggest good advice that you've heard, what's like the worst advice that you've heard?
I mean, Another big thing, I think, so some people decide not to use tripods for videography, which is fine if it's on you've got a short focal length from 24 to 100 or whatever, you can get away with it. And if you're shooting talking heads or interviews out in the field, like that's absolutely fine. Don't have tripods for like longer lens video work. And from a personal point of view, I think a tripod is like absolutely essential to get smooth motion. And so, yeah, I'd just say get a good tripod and use it as much as you can. It's a lot of effort to kind of take a tripod everywhere. Like it adds a lot of weight to the bag, but I just think actually what you get back from it is far outweighs the negatives in my view.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that you see with beginner wildlife filmmakers, other than the tripod?
I think people get a bit hung up on the camera settings and they spend a lot of time fiddling about with camera settings and getting everything absolutely perfect for the shot. And I think there's a few negatives to that. One is that you're not actually looking around for what's around you, so you can miss stuff that happens in front of you. But also it just kind of takes up a lot of time, and you can edit, as long as you don't mess it up too much, a lot of it you can bring back in post. So if you're like your exposure is too high, bring down the exposure in post, and just don't get too hung up on like the camera settings, because I mean, I always just shoot 4K S-Log3, this is video, 4K S-Log3, 100 frames a second. Make sure my aperture is around about the right place. And if you've got all that and you know that's kind of what you're working with, then you don't really need to worry about too much more than that, I would say.
Are you manual ISO or auto?
So I actually use manual because I don't want to go into the technicalities too much, but my camera has two base ISOs, which is 640 and 12,800.
Okay.
And I actually just amend the aperture with a ND filter, a neutral density filter. For people that don't know what that is, it's basically an attachment that goes on the end of the lens, which you can adjust the amount of light that comes in. So it actually kind of says, well, if there's too much light coming in, you can darken it, acts like a pair of sunglasses. And so I don't ever touch the ISO. You can just manually amend the ND filter to adjust the amount of light that comes in.
You mentioned before filming in Canada. So you've also filmed in Poland and Kenya. Would you say there's any sort of kind of difference or lesson that you learned from filming in England versus filming in these other countries?
I mean, in Canada, you've got black bears, orca, all these other amazing animals. And then obviously in Kenya, you've got lions and cheetahs and leopards and buffalo and all that kind of stuff. So I think from the average person's point of view, you get much more exotic and interesting wildlife in those places. And in England, you've got peregrines and foxes and badgers and that kind of stuff, which maybe people aren't as interested in. I personally am. I love British wildlife. But yeah, I guess it's just learning about their behaviours, and some animals are way more skittish than others, and it's about how do you approach them and what fieldcraft can you use to actually get closer to these animals. And then when I go away and maybe shoot maybe more of the more exotic animals, I've learned all my basic trades from England, and then you can apply that to what you see in Canada. I love British wildlife, and I think we've got some like amazing stuff here, but it does help to kind of learn your trade in the country you're in with maybe less exciting animals. So then when you get to the more exciting animals, you've got all your techniques nailed down in your fieldcraft to capture them well.
Speaking of exciting animals, are there any moments that stand out that either you got on camera or that you didn't get on camera?
So I actually focus a lot of my time on creatures of the sea, so cetaceans, so dolphins and whales and that kind of thing. And the drone, the emergence of kind of consumer level drones that you can get has changed it a lot. And yes, there's one time when I was in Scotland in the Outer Hebrides, and it was a flat calm day with sunshine. And for those people that have been to Scotland, they'll know that very, very rarely happens. So I wanted to make the most of this one day, and so I just spent sunrise 5:30 till sunset 9:30. So was that like 16 hours? Just sat on this headland, and I saw some pods of common dolphins, which are relatively common around those waters. But it was getting right to the end of the day. It was about 9 o'clock, and I was just getting ready to pack up and go back to the accommodation where I was staying at. And in the far distance, there was these big white fins that were coming up to the surface. And I actually at the time thought they were orca because they were big fins and they only come up every kind of 15 to 20 seconds and they were moving fast. And I got my binoculars on them, but they weren't black and white and big enough to be orca. They're actually a species of dolphins called Risso's dolphins, which are pretty rare in Scotland and in the UK in general. And so I sent my drone up. They were relatively close to the shore and tracked these dolphins as they moved really fast and right to left in front of me, and got some really nice like tracking shots as they went past. And then I was like, that's amazing. Like, I've got some really good shots and I was really happy with it. And then they went past and I looked a little bit further out and there was just one of this species of dolphins just hanging at the surface, really not moving much. And I was thinking, what's going on here? Like, is it injured? Like, I couldn't quite work out what was going on. So I put another drone on battery, sent it over the top and hit record. And I couldn't believe it because it was a Risso's dolphin by itself. And next to it was a tiny, tiny calf. And it obviously just given birth. Like, if I was to guess, it was probably like within 5 hours, but just because of the way it was swimming. And its dorsal fin was kind of over to the side. And so, yeah, I was just filming this dolphin and that kind of thing. So that was kind of like the moment that stuck in my mind almost over everything else, just because the rarity of it, but also the amount of time that I'd put into just sitting on the headland and seeing absolutely nothing, which is, of course, is like what normally happens when you're filming wildlife. Nothing really happens. So kind of 3 years I've been doing it. That is the moment that I have remembered more than anything else.
When you're sitting there for like long periods, do you have headphones in, you're listening to anything, or you're just...
No, I don't. I just, I've got a kind of personality that just allows me to not really get distracted by that much. And I think what kind of keeps me focused is just, well, that moment, for example, like that potential moment of anything can happen. So yeah, I don't listen to music or really go on my phone much. I just kind of put as much effort into concentrating as to what could happen like that.
So your YouTube channel has over 4 million views at this point. Is there any advice that you would give to people who specifically want to start a YouTube channel regarding wildlife content or specifically wildlife filmmaking?
So I'd say first and foremost, I would say try and learn and do as much research on the YouTube algorithm as you possibly can. You can create like the most engaging, interesting sequence that people just won't click on because the algorithm won't push it. So just to give it a little bit of context. So like when I first started making YouTube videos, the thumbnail and the title, I just didn't really put much thought into, and it's almost a bit, I don't particularly like doing it because it's almost a bit misleading and it's a bit of a clickbait title, but you just have to have a clickbaity title and thumbnail to get the views, unfortunately. So if you look at the biggest creators, if they were filming in Alaska, filming, the obvious title for someone that hasn't done their research and doesn't know the algorithm would be brown bears filmed at Alaska National Park catching fish, with a thumbnail of maybe a distant bear without any text or anything. But if you look at the big creators and the people that get a lot of views, it would be something along the lines of, I couldn't believe how I captured this brown bear, you know, something along those lines. And then a close-up view of the thumbnail and then a text saying, you won't believe what happened, or something like that. And so like, it's almost like playing on human psychology, and it's just like, well, I need to click on that. So there's that, like the title. And then there's just a lot
Shameless plug halfway through. I'm just going to say I've got a channel called Rule of Thumb, all about thumbnails and titles. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description. Sorry, keep going.
And so then there's also got to be like a hook as well.
Yes.
Where it will kind of draw people in and they'll be like, oh, okay, like, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the video. And it's basically trying to keep retention of that, of the viewer, which will then mean that it will get pushed to more people. So there's a lot that goes into it. And just one other thing I'd say as well is, if you've got a 15-minute video, have the first kind of 30 to 45 seconds of kind of maybe what the video shows without showing all of it.
Yes.
Of the best bits that keep people in. Yeah, I'd say that's really important as well, because you know what people's attention spans like nowadays. They'll click on a video, and if they don't like the first 30 seconds, they'll click off of it. And YouTube then won't push it.
That's great. And then to talk about Instagram, you've got over 100K followers on Insta. Is there any advice that you would say you've heard about Instagram that's kind of outdated at this point, but people keep just saying it because they've heard it before?
Yeah, I'd say time of posting, I don't think comes into it that much. So on Instagram, you can see when your followers are most active. But I would just say if it's good content, then it will get pushed to whatever time of day you post it. I don't think that matters that much.
If someone is just wanting to do stuff around wildlife content, would you recommend reels, posts, both? What's the strategy there?
Definitely reels. Reels go way more viral. I don't really like using that word, but viral than posts do. Posts sometimes do, but yeah, I mean, 9 out of 10 times do a reel. And one thing that I've changed a lot recently, actually, in the past 6 months to a year, is including like behind the scenes shots or like shots of your face. And originally I was just only focusing on what my camera sees, but now I just think people are more interested in like how you got the shot and like your actual reaction included in that as well. And I think that people can kind of relate to that a lot more rather than just seeing what your camera sees.
100%. Yeah. If you could leave aspiring wildlife filmmakers with a piece of advice that you wish you had 3 years ago, what advice would that be?
I'd say just spend as much time out in the field as you possibly can. Again, I think people can kind of get hung up on camera settings or if they're doing things right just by watching videos. But actually, if you just spend more and more time out there and playing with your camera and just learning the ins and outs of the different settings. I know I said earlier that like you don't want to get too hung up on the settings, but once you know it like the back of your hand and you get all the custom buttons set up, if something changes, that is so much more, like it gives you so much more to learn from than just watching videos. So yeah, I'd say just like get out there as much as you possibly can, and I think that will just help.
Do you think there's a point where you feel like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm good at this? Or do you think you never hit that point? Or how do you feel about that? Or is it a moment like, you know, winning this award that where you're like, all right, cool, I'm good at this?
So I wouldn't have said there's kind of like a benchmark that tells you whether or not you've succeeded. I mean, there's a lot of really, like just from a social media perspective, there's a lot of really, really great videographers and photographers out there that I know personally that have amazing shots that just, for whatever reason, just don't get the traction. So I wouldn't base it on social media. Awards, again, I wouldn't really class that as how good or bad someone is. I guess it depends which way you're looking at it. Like if you're coming at it from like a professional perspective, if you're earning decent money, then you could say you're good at what you do, right? Because you're making a living out of it. But if you're coming at it from like a hobbyist perspective, like I just say that if you're really enjoying what you're doing and you're happy with the photos, I think that's all that matters. And I think there's a lot of pressure now in social media that if you don't have a big following, then you're not good at what you do, which absolutely is not the case, because I've got a lot of like I said, like really good friends that shoot video or photos that just maybe don't have as big a following. So I just think from a hobbyist perspective, if you go out there, you take shots that you're happy with, you go home, you edit it and you're happy with it, that's all that really matters, I would say.
To wrap up content creator discussion, do you have like 3 YouTubers that you recommend in the wildlife space?
Yes. I don't watch too many. Do you know, actually, it's funny. There's really not that many videographer hobbyists that shoot wildlife. There's not. Like photography, there's a lot. And yeah, I watch some of their stuff. But just like, it's really strange. Like I can't quite work out why there's not that many hobbyist videographers. I think if you compare it to photography, and I'm not trying to play down like how difficult it is, but in terms of photography, you just need that one shot and you don't have to carry around a tripod, and it is a little bit easier than shooting video. But yeah, I think also maybe getting to grips with the editing of video is more, you know, you need more space on a hard drive to create sequences. Is a lot more difficult. So yeah, I'd like to see more hobbyists shoot video, because nowadays cameras obviously shoot great photos, but they do have the video function as well, and you know, you can shoot 4K 60 on most cameras nowadays.
If you're watching this and you're thinking, hey, I've got a YouTube channel all about wildlife, drop it in the comments, let people know.
I won't give you 3 people I follow, I'll give you one, and his name is Jake Davis.
Cool.
He lives out in Canada, and he primarily shoots like camera traps. He uses camera traps to shoot his wildlife.
Oh, yeah.
And he's done 3 videos, and all of them have got 500,000 plus views.
Yes.
How many views has he got on those 3 videos?
300K, 700K, 3.8 million,
Yeah.
and 700K.
So he's done 4 videos and it got around about 5 million views.
Yeah.
And it's very good. Like, if you want to kind of, see how to put together a really good sequence, I'd watch one of those videos. But also, just going back to what you said about like, how do people get into it, I think just looking at that shows that actually if you started tomorrow, you could get a lot of views and build up that following quite quickly. I think that's what stops people from starting out, is that, well, I've joined the YouTube game too late. And that's actually not the case, because that's a prime example of actually, if you put like together some really good videos. I think he started his channel like 6 months ago. And so, yeah, I mean, like, he's very good at what he does.
There's the other famous example recently of the guys who did the extreme birdwatching documentary, if you've seen that.
Watched it. It's amazing.
It's got like, what, 2 million views?
About that.
Views
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's their first video. I could be wrong.
I think you're right. But like, it also shows what people are interested in. There's a lot, like, there's humor in that. And those guys, I find them funny anyway. And it's just, people love humor. And it's done in a way that includes humor and like the story of how they like, just how they like try and find all these birds. And then they got the competitive element in it as to kind of, can I see more than anyone else? And then you've got like the stories of that couple that are sat in the living room and they're just like furious at the fact that they weren't the people that kind of saw the most amount of birds that year. So and like, I mean, that hasn't been done. Like, nothing like that has been ever done. And then it's also got like almost like the nerdy element of it, but they're not nerdy people. So it kind of like, because typically birders are kind of seen as nerds, right? Like, but yeah, I mean, they're not. I wouldn't class them as nerdy at all. So yeah, that's a really incredible documentary that is. I loved it so much.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description, but obviously everyone watching this has probably seen that. One thing I want to chat about is the industry. So you're in the industry. What do you do, for those who don't know?
So primarily I'm a videographer shooting natural history sequences, but I also obviously have my social media channels, which I put quite a lot of time in. So that's, kind of like my bread and butter.
With the industry, because you're in the industry, what are trends that you see happening in the industry right now?
So, I mean, it's all changing so much, so rapidly. Like, the whole natural history industry is just going through this like insane change. So just to give a little bit of context. So even 5 years ago, before the streamers like Apple and Netflix came in, the wildlife that you'd see on TV would be your typical David Attenborough narrated, only focusing on the wildlife that the camera or drone or whatever it is sees. And that would really be it. There was a few kind of shows that would be presenter led, but in terms of the actual quality of filming, it would be much, much lower. And then the streamers came in. So you'd have kind of Apple TV and a bit of Netflix and whatever, like all the other smaller platforms. And they would try and compete with the BBC and Nat Geo. So they'd film all of kind of similar sort of content to try and get viewers onto their channel. That was kind of their approach. And then I think you've probably seen it, the end of the Attenborough shows, they have like behind the scenes clips.
Yeah.
For 15 minutes. And it kind of shows like how they filmed it. And I know a lot of people that were more interested in that part than they were in the actual 45 minutes of what the show is about.
Yeah.
And so now people kind of realize that, and there's people out there that are camera operators but are also good at presenting that now have their own shows. So for people that don't know, two that I can think of off the top of my head, one is a chap called Berty Gregory, and he has one of his shows on National Geographic, and it's basically a camera crew following him around, filming what he's filming. And he just talks about kind of how he's going about it and the behavior he sees and the techniques he's using to film it. And because he's such a good presenter and engaging guy, and he really is, he's really, really amazing, people just love it. It's almost they're more interested in him and how he's going about it than what he sees. And there's another guy in England called Hamza, and he's done a show called Hamza's Hidden Wild Isles, and it's exactly the same thing. He's just an engaging guy, really good presenter, and yeah, the camera crew just kind of follow him around. And just to add to that as well, so YouTube is just getting so big in natural history now, and you're seeing all these big companies like BBC and Netflix, and like they've started uploading full length programs, and I honestly think that's where it's going to go in the future, is that people are watching less and less TV, and they're watching more and more of YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. So all these big companies are pumping a lot more money into their YouTube channel, into their Instagram and TikTok, and like even Facebook, because they know that that's actually where people are putting a lot of their time, which isn't in TV and more into social media.
So if these big companies are putting content out on YouTube, how are us, solo creators, how are we meant to compete? What would you say is our way of standing out when you are playing against Netflix and all of those guys?
That's actually a really good question, because obviously you don't have the production budgets or anything like that. Do you know, that's actually something I haven't really thought of.
From the top of my head, I think the most important thing would be being the personality that people connect to as well. So if you're probably not going to be able to capture the amount of footage and get the quality of footage that a full Netflix team or whoever production company team can do. But if you can bring a personality and something else that people can connect to, like the extreme birdwatching guys, bringing something else to the table, either a creativity or some personality or storytelling element that stands out that people haven't seen, that would be my first initial. Yeah,
I'd absolutely agree with that. And that's something I've learned actually, is that in the quality of footage, it's more about, the personality and also like the storyline you can tell. And that's why I've kind of, shifted my focus. Like I still want to get like as high quality wildlife shots as I can, but people just aren't really that bothered. And also like
not the response I expected.
But they're not though. It's absolutely true. And like also Instagram kills quality anyway. So it's people are more interested in the story and how you got the shot and like the sequence that you're trying to tell. And if it's not in focus, or if it's not shot in a way that like the typical BBC show, they're just not bothered. They're more about, like you said, like the personality.
Do you have any recommendation on people with bringing personality to the camera in YouTube or on Insta, in terms of any personality advice?
I'd say just be yourself. And I think people will see through inauthenticity. And I think that counts for so much. And I don't know, I haven't seen too many examples of it, but I'm sure people kind of play up to the camera, and it's natural, I think, maybe. But just be yourself. And like I think people would respect the fact that you're just being yourself and not putting on a presenter voice or doing any ridiculous dramatic reactions. And I think just be yourself, and I think people will like that.
YouTube, Insta, all of that is the future. Where would you say, if we look even further past like 3 years into the future, let's say 10, 20 years into the future of wildlife filmmaking, maybe AI, maybe, VR, what do you think is the future in 10, 20 years of wildlife filmmaking?
I think the traditional David Attenborough shows will still be created because there's still a market for it, but there will be nowhere near as much created as there typically has been.
You think the amount of content being made will decrease?
On TV it will, without a shadow of a doubt. It has like shifted so much in the past 5 years. I think, as I've already said, YouTube is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Like if you look at a 70-year-old man or woman, they'll still read the newspaper, they'll look at magazines, they'll watch terrestrial television, but no one does that. I know one person that does that. No one really watches normal TV. Like when was the last time you watched normal TV if it isn't live?
I literally don't even have normal TV.
There you go. So, and that's like, just a good example. And then if you just look at like school kids or university students, they're all just on their phone all the time on social media. And once they get to 50, they'll still be doing that, I'm sure, unless something else has come along. But like, I have no doubt that they'll still be doing that. And then it's just like, well, what are the 18-year-olds of this state of in 50 years time, what are 18-year-olds in 50 years time doing? I don't know. But like, if you look at that from people that make the decisions, you can see now why people are like BBC and Netflix are putting so much time into YouTube and social media, because that is what people are focusing their attention on, and it's not TV so much anymore.
If you could pick 2 documentaries or YouTube videos or anything that you would recommend for people to watch, what would you watch? And I'll have them as the end screen for this video.
Okay. Yeah. So one would be My Octopus Teacher, which is actually on Netflix, but it just shows that it's not that interesting of a subject, and it's all about the storyline and like the emotional pulls attached to that. And it just did so well, and it's been watched by so many people. So yeah, My Octopus Teacher. And then also The End of the Line. It's about overfishing and about the state of the seas, and it's a bit of an eye opener, and you can watch that on YouTube as well. I think they're both really worth watching.